When we talk about prescription drugs, it's important to understand that in our country, we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. That's simply the reality. And that causes enormous problems because millions of our people go to the doctor writes a prescription, and then the person can't afford to fill that prescription. So that's pretty crazy because doctors are doing the diagnosis, telling the patients what they need. Patients can't afford to pay for the drugs because they have the highest prices in the world in this country. So, Mr. President, this is an issue that we have got to deal with. Now, there are a number of reasons why prices in this country are higher than in Canada, Europe, Scandinavia, and certainly one of them is that we are the only major country on earth that doesn't have a national health care program so that the government can negotiate prices with the drug companies. So what happens in this country is the drug companies simply charge us what the market will bear, any price they can come up with by which they can make money. And the end result is that we pay in 2009, prices in this country were 85% higher than Canada, 150% higher than France, Italy, Sweden, and Switzerland, and so forth and so on. But the reason the drug prices are high in this country is not just that we don't have a national health care program, it's because of the enormous amount of fraud that takes place within the pharmaceutical industry. In fact, every single year, the major drug companies are ripping off the American people to the tune of billions of dollars a year because of fraudulent practices. Virtually every major pharmaceutical company in this country has either been convicted of fraud, i.e. ripping off federal government, state government, or individuals, or else has reached a settlement. And we have got to get a handle on this crisis. Now, I want to read. I'm going to bore some people because it's a long list. Sadly, it is a long list. But it's a list that has to get out, and it is an issue that we have got to deal with. So here we go. Abbott Labs is one of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies in the world. It had $38.8 billion in revenues and $4.7 billion in profits in 2011. Just last month, Abbott reached an agreement with the U.S. Department of Justice to pay $1.6 billion for illegally marketing the anti-seizure drugs Depakote. Pfizer is the largest pharmaceutical company in the world, $67.9 billion in revenues and $10 billion in profits in 2011. Pfizer, in 2012, this year, Pfizer allegedly avoided paying hundreds of millions in rebates due to state Medicaid programs for Prontonix. Johnson & Johnson is the second largest pharmaceutical company in the world, which had $65 billion in revenues and almost $10 billion in profits in 2011. In 2012, this year, Johnson & Johnson illegally marketed Risperdal, an antipsychotic medication, to nursing home patients and paid over $2 billion in fines. GlaxoSmithKline is, again, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, made profits of almost $44 billion in 2011. GlaxoSmithKline in 2011 announced that it had reached, quote, an agreement in principle, end quote, with the U.S. government to pay $3 billion to conclude the company's most significant ongoing federal government investigations. Mr. President, in 2010, the pharmaceutical industry achieved a dubious distinction. It surpassed the notoriously corrupt defense contracting industry in defrauding the government. The pharmaceutical industry accounted for nearly half, $1.8 billion of a total of $4.1 billion of the penalties collected in 2011 by the Department of Health and Human Services Healthcare Fraud and Abuse Control Program. In 2012, and this is really quite amazing, the pharmaceutical industry is expected to pay out up to 4 times the amount of last year's penalty, between $8 to $9 billion. $8 to $9 billion in penalties due to pending fraud settlements with the Department of Justice. Virtually every major drug company has either been found guilty of or settled charges of significant fraud over the last 10 years. The question arises, and this really is an important question: is fraud within the pharmaceutical industry the exception? Does it just happen here or there, or is it simply put their business model? Is fraud the business model of the pharmaceutical industry, who think that in most cases they can get away with the fraud, make huge profits, and in some cases, when they get caught, they will in fact pay a penalty, but the penalty will in no way match the kinds of huge profits they're making from their fraudulent activity? It is clear that the punishments that we now have on the books have not done enough to address this problem, because apparently the drug companies are not too intimidated by the laws on the books. They think it makes business sense for them to continue going forward on their fraudulent activities. The amendment that I am offering would send a strong and clear message to the drug industry. Illegal behavior will not be rewarded with continued government-granted monopolies. Our people are paying the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. One of the reasons is widespread fraudulent activity on the part of virtually every major drug company in our country. It is no longer acceptable to turn a blind eye to that crisis.